Hello and welcome to the LMA Scenario Moment. My name is Aaron Spears.
At Hathcock, welcome back.
Welcome back. Um, if you've seen the title of this episode, you probably know what we're going to talk about. And that would be Israel at war. Not 48 hours ago, Hamas launched a really sophisticated attack on the entire country.
Was
And,
it was it sophisticated though? I mean, they
yeah, because
paraglided over the border. I don't know if that was
well,
sophisticated. I mean, like Simpsons did it, so
it's sophisticated in the way that you could execute the biggest terrorist attack in history with 18 box cutters. Like that's all you needed was a box cutter, and you could do that. And
and some
yeah, like you said, there,
homegrown flight lessons.
yeah, not landing, just taking off, and that's it.
One way.
Um, it was a one-way trip. So yeah, it's sophisticated in the sense that it was heavily coordinated, and they had like
Sure.
gyrocopters, and they blew up a barrier, and they went to different towns and just slaughtered people. And I guess you would say it's a military failure. It's an Israeli government failure that they didn't know that this was coming, or they didn't prepare for it, which we don't
Right.
know.
And like how? How did they not? So I was just listening to Breaking Points before we started talking here, and they were saying about how like the border for Israel is supposed to be like one of the most secure borders like out of any country in the world. And so how is it that Hamas was able to like plan these attacks? Israel claims that they have uh, informants and infiltrators inside of Hamas and Hezbollah and all this other stuff, but is that really true? Since, like you said, this is one of the most horrific terrorist attacks in quite a while, I guess.
Probably ever.
It could be, yeah. Because so they were also stating that like Israel hasn't had a terrorist attack in a decade. So that's I think I guess pretty good, right? Like 10 years without a terrorist attack, and
Well,
uh,
they have incidences here and there, but I don't. As far as like a suicide bombing or whatever, yeah, I guess that probably is true.
well, they have like a huge security state, right? So apparently, pretty much anywhere you go in Israel, you get wanded for explosive vests and shit like that. So apparently, it's quite a shock to most people who go visit there because it's super duper secure. Like, that shit doesn't happen here in the US, right? Like, you're not getting necessarily wanded when you go into fucking CVS or something like that. Sure, we do it for large scale events for like sports and things of that nature, but
Yeah, I guess you trace this back to when the Israelis, 22, whatever it was years ago, um, pulled all Jews out of the Gaza Strip, whether they wanted to go or not, and they handed it over, and the Palestinians selected Hamas as their leadership, and you know, you they just kind of let it fester, and that's what Israel's been forced to do. Is they have to show so much restraint because it's like other countries will blame them if they go too far. I'm not saying in this case that's not gonna it. Now it's too late. Like this is just it's on. But in the past,
sure. And like, I'm not a Middle East geographer, right? But they have, Israel's pretty much surrounded by enemies on like all sides, with the exception of like Egypt. That's probably the only friendly border that they really share with anybody, and it's not like it's a huge border there. Like it's
they had to
only
win the
I mean
6 Day
probably a
War
100 square
for
miles.
Egypt to. I mean, first of all, I don't know if Egypt had any involvement one way or the other. So like, I don't even see them as like their ally. But
Well, so
they
what Egypt
that's what
has
they
done in this situation has is actually closed the border to Egypt. They've flooded um, they like flooded all the tunnels that they knew of that they could carry migrants under into Egypt, and they completely shut their borders down. And Egypt has been part of like a blockade outside of Gaza to prevent them from going fishing and stuff like that because they're really trying to crunch Gaza. So Egypt has been involved, especially with Israel, in regards to those kinds of things, like keeping Gaza suppressed and stuff. So,
Um, well, yeah, and like I said, the only reason that is a thing is because the Israelis already beat them in the 6 Day War. So, um, I was just while you were talking, I was kind of looking over Benjamin Netanyahu's speech he just put out on Twitter moments ago. Um, and yeah, it's just over, like so Gaza it was operating independently. It had ports. It wasn't allowed to have an international airport, obviously, but it was operating independently, and I don't see there's no reason to believe anything coming out of that area now about any of this, because if they really cared about peace, or they really cared about an independent Palestine, then this wouldn't have occurred. Um,
well,
I guess
you have to draw the distinction between Palestinians and Hamas. Okay, they're not entirely the same thing. I'm not saying that there's not support for Hamas within Palestine. I guarantee that there is. There's support for Hamas people apparently living in fucking Tampa, Florida, and Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and in Canada, and in New York City.
Vancouver.
Like,
Yep.
obviously, there are, people out everywhere protesting in support of Palestine. Um, does that necessarily mean that they support Hamas? I don't know. Like,
I
but
think so.
that's the way it's going to be painted. Just like after 9/11, everybody painted kind of all Muslims in a really bad light. Like, that was a really tough time for Muslims in America and stuff, because of obviously what happened. So I guess it kind of has to be put into context that way. Like, Israel 100% is killing like innocent civilians that live in Palestine, sure, that aren't part of Hamas or don't support Hamas, but it's kind of indistinguishable pretty much in war. Like, they don't care.
Well, our last example was the Russians don't care about Ukrainian civilians, and that sucks too. But um, you know, Israel's always been forced to restrain itself, and
Sure.
it can't
The
restrain
U.S.
itself
the
this
U.S.
time.
doesn't care about civilians either. Like, the drone strike program in the U.S., 95% of people that were killed by that program were innocent civilians.
I mean,
So it
Biden killed a whole family of kids, like after Afghanistan's withdrawal. So
it's the cost of war that people like just don't really talk about. Like, everyone just kind of picks a side in the war, and they continue on in that fashion. But let's make no mistake about it, it's going to be horrific for both sides in a long scale war, which I think we're going to have. We've had the Israeli prime minister say that we're done. Like, we need to go into Gaza. They apparently are planning on sending troops into Gaza, but they've held back on that so far. I guess they are concerned about Lebanon invading Israel if they go to war and like send troops into Gaza. So they're kind of feel fearful of a full scale invasion from Lebanon on an opposite border.
yeah, we should probably clarify that. What you mean is Hezbollah in Lebanon, not necessarily Lebanon itself. Although I don't know what the relationship is there.
Right. They're also worried about Syria and the Hezbollah units in Syria as well, like pushing in. So they have to play it safe because they're worried about a full scale invasion of their country instead of ultimately what is a small scale invasion. Um, I mean, they didn't take over anything and they don't hold any ground necessarily, so
You mean in Israel?
it's more of like an incursion. Yeah.
It's that's unclear at the moment. So we should probably just talk about like what how this kind of all unfolded. There was a dance festival, like an EDM festival, and mostly young people, and there was an all night thing. It was out in the middle of the desert, and that is where the first sort of horrific attacks came through. They got through the barrier, they flew over, and then I've read just so many accounts now, just absolute slaughter. The Hamas terrorists, like they were just shooting and gunning down anybody they could see. They were taking women hostage. They were raping the women next to the bodies of their friends. They would then execute them. In some cases, um, I think they were raping even the bodies. I mean, it's like I can't really, I don't have the imagination
Right, it's
for it.
definitely horrific. I mean, everything that
Yeah.
they've done was horrific. Um, Honestly, the paragliding thing kind of inventive, I guess. Um, like the
Yeah.
stupid like fan
Yeah.
carts for them to get over the border undetected. Like, and that's kind of what we mentioned a little bit before. Like, how the hell did this happen? Like, how did they get over the border undetected? Like, those things
I'll tell
can't
you,
fly
I'll
that
go even
high.
one
Like, it's
further.
it's amazing.
Well, actually, I think that might be why it was so easy for them to get over, is because they couldn't fly that high. They were so low. But they also were utilizing drones that we've seen in places like Ukraine, where the Ukrainians are dropping grenades from drones onto targets. And they did that with those automatic machine guns that Israel has set up along the border. And we should also mention that the Israeli army didn't respond for like 8 hours.
Oh
And
yeah, they
so,
had free reign like inside of Israel for
yeah.
quite a long time, and we're talking about a terrorist attack occurring. Like that's a long 8 hours, man. Like when you're running for your life and trying to avoid detection by Hamas because they were going door to door and killing people.
Yeah, we should
So
mention. Okay, so there's the festival, and then there's the like 20 or so towns that were basically just invaded and just mass executions and kidnappings. So in the festival, you got this number 260. It's a lot. It's a lot of casualties there. And then you have the other thing that happened, which is they were going into these small communities, like very small towns, and they were going door to door, and they were either kidnapping the children, or in one case, they actually kidnapped an Alzheimer woman a woman who has Alzheimer's. She was like 89, I think. She was like a survivor of the Holocaust. And they were like parading her down the street. I mean, in Gaza, like crazy. And they got a little boy. Was like 4 years old. So they've got like a lot of different people. And they were going to these houses, and they were killing the parents and then taking the kids, or they were killing the whole family. In some cases, people had to, of their own accord, go to the towns where the people were under attack and rescue them. Um, and yeah, there were only regular traffic police types that were there, so there was like no army presence, and so these guys got overwhelmed and they were like just slaughtered. And so that death toll, which is now up to 1,000, probably goes up. And the reason why is because I think there might still be pockets of gunmen in the country that are hiding, and they haven't locked down, they haven't gotten their country under control yet.
So
Is what I'm trying to
Israel
say.
has admitted that much that they still have pockets of Hamas, uh, small cells, I guess, because we're talking 5,000 Hamas soldiers were in there. So of course they're gonna scatter. Like you kind of see like they're in different areas and they're kind of spreading out and stuff to cause as much chaos as humanly possible. They're firing rockets into Israel and stuff as well. And they are doing whatever they got to do. There was I think a story they found like 260 bodies because this town basically like wanted to defend itself, and they had like a standoff with Hamas, and I guess obviously lost. Hamas is going to be definitely greatly more skilled at fighting than just your like normal civilians and stuff. But we saw, I shared that tweet with you, the Israeli like national like security minister or whatever decided to forego some gun laws that they have in Israel so that people can start getting guns to defend themselves against Hamas because they know that they still have Hamas cells lurking through Israel. So yeah, you're right. Like it's kind of crazy in the streets and probably will be for quite a while. Things we haven't seen is them declare like a lockdown. It's probably pretty self-explanatory for something like this to lock down, but they haven't stated that like a curfew. They haven't kind of put anything forward as far as safety measures go in that way, as far as I've seen at least. I'm sure there's got to be something though.
You have to sit back and kind of go like, Israel always shows this restraint I mentioned, and then it's like, do the Jewish people have a right to fight for their own lives, or are they just expected to apologize every time something like this happens and they go too far? And it's like we're watching in real time just like massive rockets, targeted missiles in Gaza, and like, people were complaining online. I mean, the discourse online is horrible because people really do support Hamas. But they blew up a mosque, and somebody said like, well, Hamas didn't blow up any temples or anything, and it's like, if you watch the video, it's hilarious because they blow up this mosque, and then like 10 seconds later, the entire thing explodes like twice as big because they hide munitions inside of soft targets like schools, clinics, and mosques. I mean, Israel knows exactly what they do and how they use the Palestinians as like human shields and stuff. So
yeah, it's definitely a really complex situation. From the U.S. standpoint, we're seeing pretty much everybody but Joe Biden talk about it at this point. Lindsey Graham went on saying that if Hezbollah has any like attacks against Israel, which we're actually already kind of seeing, that we should attack Iran and destroy all of their like oil refining capabilities and everything else, even though our intelligence agencies are saying they don't have any evidence that Iran was responsible for funding Hamas in this particular situation and stuff, but we know that it's a possibility.
I don't know what evidence what evidence would you need? Because we know that Iran supports Hamas and Hezbollah. We know this.
Oh, we definitely know this, and I wonder if that is like them coming out saying that is kind of tempering the problems with Iran, because we all know that the Biden administration, as well as the Obama administration, which it's a continuation of, had ties with Iran. They were trying to make things positive. They've released billions of dollars, and not just the billions that Biden gave them, but Obama gave them tons of money as well. We're kind of seeing that play out, right? So why would the intelligence agencies go and say, oh yeah, it was definitely Iran?
Okay. This is probably a dark hypothetical, but I'll ask you anyway, because we just happen to speculate every once in a while. Do you think it would be a good idea for... Is there a scenario in which you would support the United States attacking inside of Iran?
Yes, but only because you and our other friend have fully convinced me to go full bore on World War III. So I'm going to go in that fashion and definitely say yes. Send the troops. All of them. Send them to Ukraine too.
I don't think...
World War III. Let's fucking go.
You're being facetious.
I am being facetious. That. I'm fucking anti-war, you dummy. You know that.
But I want to say, like, is there a scenario, no, seriously, where you would say America should strike in Iran to retard the nuclear program or the oil industry, whatever,
I don't think so. And
I don't
Do
think
I
so
think they
either.
will, or do I think that if there's a reason to? Sure, I think there's a reason to in some capacity. Do I think they will? Absolutely not. I mean, they've
I
been
don't think so
trying
either.
to work with them on the nuclear program and like deter them from getting nuclear weapons, which is not going to happen. Okay, if they want a nuclear weapon, they will get their hands on one. They know that they can probably buy one out there from some arms dealer that has one because there was like 90 nukes missing from fucking when the USSR collapsed and shit. So,
Still
they're
missing.
out there. Okay, they're out there.
Yeah.
They don't need to build one. They can buy one, especially with the money that they keep getting. So, is there a reason? I don't know. Like they haven't attacked America, although they have killed. I think it's up to 9 American citizens.
Oh
So
yes, I forgot. Yeah,
we did forget to mention that they have killed 9 American citizens.
we know they have American hostages
We
actually as
100
well.
they 100% do. Um, but I don't know that we would fully attack a country just because they kill tourists. Um, or else we probably would have invaded Mexico to kill the cartels by now because they kill tourists all the time. Uh, so I don't know. I don't think that there's a situation where the U.S. wants a full-on escalation with Iran.
I it's interesting because Saudi Arabia ended the normalization discussions with Israel. I'm not sure if that's temporary to save face.
So I did send that to you, and then I looked. I saw like a couple other things that were kind of talking about that. They mentioned that it was a temporary cessation in discussion, probably because they can't focus their time and energy right now on those discussions, right? Like they're gonna just have to deal with the crisis that they have at hand. So that's likely where that comes from. Um, but it's not good.
Yeah, yeah. I wondered if it was temporary. I'm kind of glad to hear that. I think because that shows that Saudi Arabia is just waiting to see Israel's response. Basically, Israel has no choice now but to just show its full strength and capability. But it
Which
makes
they're
me
gonna
wonder if
do. They're definitely gonna do that. I mean,
we haven't seen anything
you
like
know,
this in the modern era, actually.
there were some videos floating around of what they said was Hamas going door to door, but it was actually Israeli special forces going door to door. I guess trying to either root out Hamas or something like that. But good old community notes.
Yeah, yeah. Community notes that the only good feature that Elon Musk has added to his platform X. I'm looking at a picture right now. It says 108 bodies were discovered in Kibbutz Be'eri, women, children, entire families. That's 10% of the town's residents. So these are the kinds of things I'm referring to when I say that the number is just going to keep going up because Hamas went systematically town to town to town and completely wiped people out. And so they're just finding just endless amounts of bodies, which makes you wonder 48 hours later why it's still taking so long to get a full accountability of who is alive and not. And yeah, this also was a social media attack. Hamas used TikTok and other X to get the video out of the shit they were doing. I mean, they committed war crimes on defenseless foreign nationals or people with dual citizenship. And yeah, it's explicitly online. It's meant to strike fear into people.
Oh yeah, and Hamas now
And I
is stating that like if the U.S. has like gets any involvement, which they already are because they're sending the Gerald R. Ford aircraft carrier out here.
yeah,
So of course we're involved in some capacity, and now Hamas is saying that they're going to start executing people and sharing video of those executions for the news and on social media and stuff like that to kind of portray terror even further and kind of put people in their place and stuff like that. So we're gonna see that coming for sure.
what do you make of the President Biden's complete lack of response to any of this? Like, tweeting about his jobs added, like just autopilot all the way. Kamala Harris nowhere to be seen.
What else is new? Like, sure,
Like,
they
isn't
had
this like crazy?
right. So they did have a press conference. I believe the day that it occurred, and like I will say, Biden spoke very clearly in that press conference and stuff. But that was kind of before they found out about 9 dead Americans, and they really had
Which
like
they haven't talked about. They have not
right
addressed
at
that
all. And they didn't have a full body count and stuff. And now for the second day in a row, he's taking a lid at noon today. So it's already 4:30. So he took that lid. So he's gone. And then I know people were getting really pissed off because as soon as he was told the news, he still had a barbecue at the White House. So
Thank you
like
for
a
bringing that up.
like a live band and stuff. I hate to defend Biden because I hate him, but what's he to do? Like, he had this whole thing planned. Is he to just take off completely and like be like, oh, I can't do this barbecue now? Like, because
Yeah.
realistically, what could he have done at that time? What could he have done at that time? Because he didn't have enough information. He's not going to send troops. It was still a very early ongoing situation. So again, like, I'm not defending him because obviously he still hasn't like answered the bell other than one quick press conference. But now we're a couple days into this. There's Americans involved. There's potential other terrorist acts going on with Hezbollah and everything, and now he's completely silent on it fucking 2 days later. So I trust me, I'm not defending Joe Biden here, but like, what should he have done in that situation? Because there's nothing he could have done.
Do you think a DeSantis or a Nikki Haley, perhaps even a Trump administration, would have handled that whole thing differently? I feel like they would have.
Yeah, but they've been ever more present forever. Like, Biden, he doesn't, he takes lids all the time. He takes a lot of vacations. He takes a lot of time off. He goes home a lot, like to Delaware and shit. Like, I mean, yeah, because Trump is more energetic and stuff like that. Now he'll probably say some crazy shit for sure, but he has more energy, he has more capability, more mental capacity, diminished by the fact that he's an idiot, but more mental capacity for just doing the hard thing of being president and getting yourself out there in front of the public. Yeah, I think they would have been more vocal on it. And Trump loves to tweet, so.
Well, I think that it's also an interesting thought experiment because I think Biden relies so heavily on the media to cover for his blunders, and that the media didn't talk about the barbecue, and that a DeSantis would have been skewered for having a barbecue right after this event.
Sure.
I think that says a lot too, that a Republican administration would be a little more thoughtful about the events they were holding, and because the media would grill them on it.
I mean, DeSantis came right out after the whole Fort Lauderdale and Tampa thing. Like, it was immediate from him.
Yeah.
It wasn't 2 days later. He was like, oh, we shouldn't do this. Like, we were seeing up in Canada a lot of pro-Palestine or even pro-Hamas protesting, and like, they didn't even say shit about it until today, maybe. So it was like 2 days too late, and they're like, oh, sorry, yeah, we actually meant to condemn this, but we just didn't.
I mean, that is pretty wild.
And these days, all you have to do is send a fucking tweet. Like, you don't even have to have a press conference or anything. But it's, again, like what you said, the only tweet from the POTUS X account today was about 336,000 jobs being added, which 70,000 of them were government jobs. Another 126,000 of those jobs were part-time jobs.
People are working 2 jobs, and they're counting each of those as a six pepper job.
Right. And the actual overall full-time jobs decreased by 22,000 jobs last month.
Yep.
So, like, what he tweeted, what he tweeted out was a complete fucking lie anyway. So instead of saying something about what's going on with your Twitter account for the day, you fucking put out a lie. Or a deception, sorry. Might not be a lie.
Misinformation.
Fucking Decepticons.
Somebody who I follow on X who is, I think his family is actually, he was born in Israel, so he has like a lot of ties back there. He tweeted, X'd, posted 1,500 terrorist bodies in the area around Gaza thus far. This is all inside Israeli territory. I'm not sure what that means. Are they saying that they have terrorists in the country, or are they saying they have terrorists that are dead?
When I hear bodies, I typically would think dead.
Dead, right?
Yeah, that's what I would
then
think.
It's like
but
all inside
it
of
could
Israeli
just be,
territory?
right? It could just be a count. Like, why would they say in Israeli territory if they're?
It could be a translation error. It's in Hebrew.
And right. So that's the other thing. Like, everything on Twitter you see is like everything is in like Arabic or Hebrew, I guess, and stuff like that, and you don't know if the fucking translation is right or not. Like, I can't speak either of those languages, so I don't know if any of those translations are correct and what's really going on. You know, especially everything's so sensationalized and polarized. Like, you'll see a tweet or a post or whatever you want to call it, and then 5, 10, 15 minutes later you see something completely contradictory to that. So, like, I know some of the things that I've sent you, and like I've seen the complete opposite of that tweet also out there. Mm-hmm. And what I said to you and our super fan earlier today was like, it's amazing how quickly everything is happening online. Like, the retaliation into Gaza was like immediate. We didn't even like invade Afghanistan the next day. You know what I mean? Like, it was a couple weeks later, like a month later or whatever. But everything is just like so fast. And Twitter is just like pumping out so much shit, and everybody has their opinion and then the other side of the opinion within seconds. And so we're just seeing 48 hours worth of government movement and like troop movement and like all this other shit happening so quick. It's quite amazing to watch, actually. It's probably the fastest that anybody's ever mobilized ever.
Yeah, they mustered 100,000 in 24 hours, and there's, I think, 300,000 now. There are people who aren't even eligible reservists who are signing up.
But let's not conflate the fact, like, they were ready for this. So, like, we know that they were ready for this. They've been preparing for this shit for, 1,000 years? Like, that conflict is so crazy. Like, I don't even know the full, like, bones about it. But this has been going on forever, like forever. There was a big conflict in like 2018. I sent you a bunch of numbers earlier where like 31,000 Palestinians ended up dead and like 100 Israelis. And if you look at the way that those numbers bear out over time, way more Palestinians die ever than Israelis. Like, part of that is obviously the defenses that they have and everything are way more capable than whatever Palestine has and stuff. But it's quite interesting to see how this thing has like played out. They keep calling this like the deadliest terror attack. I don't know. Wouldn't seem
it
that
is in
way
Israel's
to me.
history.
Is it though? I mean, I don't know the full extent of their history, so I'm not too sure about it. But yeah, it can
before
get, like,
this,
pretty crazy.
The worst one was the plane was hijacked in the 70s, I think, maybe like 76, and during that operation, a lot of people lost their lives. But before that, not anything close to this.
Where do you think they go from here? I mean, the Israelis have been pretty adamant about completely annihilating Hamas, like wiping them off the face of the earth. Um, that's they've made that pretty fucking evident in my opinion. But I feel like they can't do so without completely wiping Gaza off the map.
Oh, I think so. I can't probably answer this just very easily. I think that the last time they had a war, it was 32 days, and there were a lot of concessions made. I think that this time it's over and done. I don't know. I don't know what happens to Gaza at the end of this. I don't know if like Palestinians are allowed to like coexist there, but I guarantee you that Hamas is going to be non-existent. I don't know if that's going to take 7 days or 30 days or tonight, but they're gone.
Right, but with terrorist groups, we understand this.
Cut off
Obviously,
a head and then another one sprouts up.
right, and we saw that play out dramatically between Afghanistan and Iraq, and invention of ISIS, and like you just generate more terrorism. Like with the more terrorists you kill, especially if you're killing innocent civilians, and some of the stuff I sent you, which for the record, everybody, Aaron and I are pretty much online all day. Like, we get to see stuff happen all day in
In
real
real time,
time,
yeah.
and a lot of it is very difficult to process. But like, I sent you a video of this guy in Palestine, like holding his baby, had to have been like a 1.5 year old maybe, and was like holding her, and because she was dead, and he was like saying his final goodbyes, and like clearly that child was not a terrorist. Like, it was just the byproduct of terrorists killing. And now that father, in my opinion, has every right to become radicalized against Israel if they're the ones that killed his child. I mean, that's just an inevitable fact.
You're using the logic I think that some people do in good faith when they try to talk about this. I get it. I think that the scale of the level of death and just the criminal acts that were conducted, I think make it impossible to have sympathy for them anymore, and they just have to. I don't know. If I was Israel, I might just say we should just occupy Gaza now.
But so you can't have sympathy for a dead 1-year-old child that had
It's
absolutely
really
nothing to
hard.
do with the terrorist attack?
It's really hard for me because you had because children on the other side died, and they died first, and then you've got these. Yeah, it's every child dying is a tragedy, but they explicitly went over the border and executed complete families and children.
Is,
And
is
I've seen
that
the
is that
pictures.
1-year-old a member of Hamas or not?
That 1-year-old is not a member of Hamas.
Well then, what's your answer? Is it okay
I don't know.
to bomb and kill children? That
I
had
don't.
nothing to do with it.
People are going to get killed.
Either side, it's not okay.
Uh,
Either side.
Innocent people. Well,
Russia has been
it's gonna
targeting
happen.
civilians and stuff too. It is obviously wrong. Like, civilians oftentimes get killed in wars way more than actual troops do, even in modern versions of war. This isn't World War II anymore. Like, we have a very modern schema for fighting wars, except I guess the Ukrainians kind of fall back on World War II style tactics sometimes, which is odd, but um, it's not okay. Like, that's not okay. Just plain and simple. It's not.
If you need me to say it's not okay, it's not. I'm not trying to say I don't care. I'm saying that as it stands today, get ready for more of those
Oh,
pictures.
dude, I mean, come on. They come out of Yemen all the time, where the
Oh, we've
UAE,
seen worse.
the UAE is killing people in Yemen for years. I mean, like, I think like I don't know, it was like 400,000 people a year or something are killed in Yemen, like some crazy shit. And obviously, most of them are civilians. So, eh, it's a cost of war, and now these people in Gaza have to suffer because of what a terrorist organization has done.
I know,
But
I know.
You know, it's the same thing. Like the people in Afghanistan suffered because of what Al Qaeda had done to the United States and all this other stuff too. Like it just never ends in that fashion. Like it's a vicious cycle. And we're going to see a lot more of this.
Yeah, it forces me to ask the question: does the life of a Jewish person mean less than the life of a Palestinian? And that if you ask certain people, especially certain members of Congress in the United States, they would say a Jewish life is less valuable than a Palestinian life. I mean,
Yeah, I would likely say that. You know, we ironically also some of the people we've seen be relatively silent are like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Ilhan
she's been radio
Omar
silent.
already
Ilhan
came
Omar,
out.
nope. Yeah,
She
did you see
already
what she
came
wrote?
out kind of saying like Palestine is great. Like,
Oh,
you
you got to
know,
read her Twitter thread. It's crazy shit. She has a X thread that she put up. I'll see if I can find it.
and we've seen that for a long time. She's been very pro-Palestinian. She's actually made some anti-Semitic remarks in the past, which get completely downplayed because of who she is, and it's just kind of like atrocious to see because they at the end of the day, Israel was the one who was attacked here, right? So if we're condemning terrorism, it doesn't matter really who is attacked or what, like you or who attacks. Like you have to condemn the attacker. It's an act of terrorism, and you have to support the people who were terrorized. Like that's just kind of natural proclivities of humanity, right? But that's not what she did. Like she completely changed up like her tactic and went full Palestine, and we've seen that before. So it's just an interesting thing to see everybody kind of take these different stances on things so early
I've
on
been
too.
told you weren't allowed to take both sides, or both sides isn't as bad. And then this is what she writes. This is an hour ago, recording at 1:48 p.m. on Monday. Just as we honor the humanity of the hundreds of innocent Israeli civilians and 9 Americans who were killed this past weekend, that number will go up. We must honor the humanity of the innocent Palestinian civilians who have been killed and whose lives have been upended. See that right there? And she goes on. It's all grievances. We're talking like over 1,000 people so far. Like one of the biggest terrorist attacks in history. It has to be. I can't imagine.
It's shocking to me that there's such a huge like disparity, and I will say even support for Israel before any of this happened. There was a huge support for Israel. Just looking at Gaza and like understanding that there's 2.2 million people in all of Gaza, and it's like very, very small. Like people
It's one of the most densely packed places on earth.
right. It's the third. What I heard was like the third most densely packed place in the entire world. And it, you know, everyone's likening it to an open air prison because they
Which
have
it's not.
water on one side, and then they have 2 closed borders. You know, the situation between Gaza and Israel at their border has been troublesome for decades. Remember, like snipers were like shooting kids trying to cross over into Israel and shit like that.
I do.
Like, it's that was what, back in the early 2000s maybe.
It was 2001, I think, when they last had their like a major conflict. But Brad, here's the problem I struggle with. The Israeli government gave them the Gaza Strip. They literally said, we're taking our own citizens. We're forcibly going to remove them from the Gaza Strip. We're going to give this to you. And then
Right,
where they are now.
But again, it reminds me of the sci-fi fantastic movie District 9.
It does, yeah.
It
good point.
very much echoes like that entire situation. and it's interesting to see the parallels there, because they did the same thing in that movie for the aliens. They're like, well, we're gonna give you this area, and then they decided to try and like get rid of them and like deport them and stuff. You know what I mean? So it's like kind of crazy in that regard, but that's kind of exactly what's happening. And it's just interesting that Gaza has been able to amass the weaponry that it does, and like, how does it even get there with all these closed
Iran.
borders and stuff? Right, but how does it get there if they have like if they can't bring ships in basically, and all their
Oh, they
borders
can.
are closed? Like, it's got to be tough. But how such a small country has like amassed these arms to even attack Israel in the first place is very interesting to me.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, they're not as closed off as the media in the United States would like you to believe. I'll say that. But people were upset that Gaza's electricity got cut off.
Well, so
I
you had mentioned war crimes. I saw somebody mention that, like, they shut off all of the electricity and water, and their like barricading abilities to like get food and drinkable water and things like that in Gaza, and they likened those to war crimes. Um, what's your like feeling on that? Like, is that a war crime? Like, obviously, torturing people
mm-mm.
like Hamas did and the United States did, is war crimes. Like those
I saw
are.
war crimes 2 days ago. I saw images
Oh
of
yeah,
women bleeding from the between their legs. Like I
right.
saw war crimes.
That those were 1,000% war crimes. So that's why I find it interesting for somebody to state that cutting off all of their water and stuff is a war crime. But the only reason that would lean me in that direction is Israel's Prime Minister, Netanyahu. His like stance on it was, we're fighting animals and this is what you do to animals. But again, you're dealing with civilians too. Not They're not all members of Hamas. So you're now hurting potentially 2.2 million people for, I don't even know how many members of Hamas that are there in Gaza. It's probably an untold amount, but
Yeah. Well,
I don't know that I would necessarily call that a war crime, like for
I don't.
sure.
Well, I don't. But
But
I
I
I
think with the rhetoric though involved from Netanyahu, and this calling everyone in Palestine animals and like all this other shit, like,
they've said far worse about the Jewish
oh,
people.
100%. That's no doubt in my mind.
I
That's
mean,
what I
that's
mean.
the
That
both sidesism, right?
right,
I'm
this whole
like,
conflict is just, it's just an
it's again,
escalation of a conflict that's been going on for thousands of years.
it's just like it's the same question I go back to, which is like, is a Jewish life worth as much as a Palestinian life? If you call one an animal, both of them an animal, is one worse than the other? I don't know,
I'd
but
tell you
no,
to
I
ask Joe Biden, but he's not available afternoon today, so
yeah, he didn't come into work. Today's a federal holiday. Maybe he just took the day off. I don't know.
yeah,
Um,
Indigenous Peoples Murder Day.
yeah. So I don't think there's much more I can give you right now because everything's kind of just quickly escalating, and I just think that now it's just go through Gaza and just,
Right,
I don't
but
know,
like I
cleanse it.
said, their hesitation on doing that, because that was actually their initial plan, was like, we're going into Gaza, like there's nothing you can do about it, and then they pulled back on that because they're afraid of Hezbollah in Lebanon, and we're seeing Hezbollah attack some different things, and we've seen the Taliban ask Iran for safe passage through Iran so they could come in and help invade Israel with Hamas and Hezbollah. Like,
It's
Iran
just
is
Biden's mess.
100% surrounded by enemies, like all over the place. And you're right, it is Biden's mess. The Middle East this is probably the most unstable we've seen the Middle East, in a while. In a while, I will say. And it kind of all started with withdrawing from Afghanistan. Not that that wasn't the right idea, but it opened up a presence and then put the Taliban back in power too. One of the to kind of tie that all together is one of the reports we're seeing is that Hamas has some weapons that were allegedly left over from when the Biden administration pulled out of Afghanistan.
Yeah, man.
And that the Taliban has actually been supplying Hamas with U.S. backed arms. So
can you imagine if we find that out? It would.
Then what? Then what? Do we fucking invade Afghanistan again? And slap them on the wrist and be like, "Don't do that." You know, we fought you for 20 years.
We don't because Biden's in charge. I mean, Biden wouldn't even be held accountable for that. In this current climate, where the media covers for every little fuck up he does.
You know, it's interesting to see that too, because like we had mentioned in our last podcast, they've actually been kind of like playing both sides there and attacking him for, you know, misremembering things or whatever you want to call it. But then they also defend him. So they're kind of taking both sides here where they're trying to kill him and help him at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, not that we need to belabor any like politics in America, but I don't know, man. He just at some point they're gonna have to. You can't 4 more years.
But this is another rally cry for politics in America. Like, let's make no mistake about that. You know, people are willing to vote based on how they feel about Ukraine, and now we're gonna add Israel into the mix too, and we're gonna see candidates get primaried and stuff like that because of their stances on Israel and Palestine. Like, I firmly believe that. I really
isn't
do.
it interesting the dichotomy between defending Ukraine at all costs after they got invaded, but not defending Israel at all costs after they were invaded? I find that to be a very the left struggles with these ideas. They don't know quite how to square the circle on either, I think.
No, I agree with you in that respect, and so that's what I mean. Like, this situation can't kind of go unaddressed from a political standpoint because it's going to have repercussions here in America too, especially coming up in an election year. I think people's stance on this is really going to matter, especially if the conflict continues to draw out any further. Like, if this pushes into, you know, everybody thought kind of that Russia would be done with Ukraine by now, or they would have lost by now. People thought that would be kind of a short war. Obviously, it's a long, drawn-out, protracted war. And what if this pushes into 6 months? You know, where we're full swing into campaign trails and everybody's on the campaigns, and you know, I'll be interested to see, because we have a third Republican primary debate coming up soon.
Supposedly, yeah.
It'll be interesting to see how some of the questions from this situation get posed to Republicans. I'd especially like to see how Vivek Ramaswamy and Nikki Haley handle these questions, because she consistently attacks him on his lack of knowledge about foreign policy and things like that. So he would need to really step up in this regard to keep any chance of kind of remaining in the race, because we all know where Nikki Haley's going to stand here. She's already stood by Israel and continues to do so. So it would be interesting to see what stance everybody kind of takes and how they, like, I would want to know, I think in that Republican primary, what their stance is on Israel, and like, how would you handle the foreign policy around Israel and Palestine and all this other stuff. So it definitely is going to have a big effect here, especially if it lasts any longer. And into the number of months as opposed to days or weeks.
Yeah, presidencies are often defined by things you would never be able to predict, and that's why COVID played an issue, and that's why the financial crisis played an issue, and the bailouts, and that's why the Middle East suddenly becoming a igniting once again could be an issue that just was unforeseen.
Right, we just got out.
But
we just got out.
Yeah. Except for okay, so we've basically finished that. It's sad. That's not an easy thing to talk about. Is there anything else you wanted to mention, maybe from our docket, or you had any ideas, any topics of interest? It seems like this is kind of all that's going on right now. So.
Well, it's definitely like the number one thing. I actually would like to point out a very small thing that probably a lot of people wouldn't realize here. While all of this was going on, Vivek Ramaswamy actually went to the Canadian border, and he pointed out that there's like two signs, and one is like this way to the border, and then the other one specifically points out a hiking trail that you can cross a very small creek, and he actually crossed it, and the water never came up like past his knees, where you can just completely bypass the border patrol at all costs and sneak into the country. And while everyone's complaining about what's going on at the southern border, it's important to note that coyotes will actually fly people into Canada and then come down the border into the United States. And I've seen people arguing online like, no, if this were true, people would stay in Canada. And I'm like, no, they wouldn't, because it's very, very hard to stay and live in Canada. They actually have stricter immigration laws than the United States does. So, like, they actually, to gain immigration status into Canada, they put you on like a scoring system based off of like your job. And if you have a job that's deemed more important than other jobs, you score higher on an immigration basically scale. And that's how they determine the best people to allow to stay in Canada.
That seems, what's the word? Maybe a little racist?
So it's, I mean, I don't know. I haven't seen it or anything like that, but I know somebody who looked into the process, and people underestimate the fact that I think Robert F. Kennedy shared this, that like 220,000 immigrants a year just fly into the United States without like ever hitting a checkpoint of any kind, and then they just stay here.
I mean, our immigration system is fucked. I don't know why anybody would want to immigrate to an authoritarian country like Canada. I mean, the Canadian people cry out to be liberated, so that should be our next target. I think we should invade Canada and Greenland.
I say
Probably
we just,
Australia too.
I say we just do it all. Canada,
We need to liberate
Mexico,
them. They cry out for change, for regime change.
they need it.
Yeah.
And if the U.S. is good at anything, it's regime change. Let's be honest about that.
I mean, we could remove Trudeau and put in like a puppet government that we control and
We
arm
could
the
we could
resistance.
also remove Trudeau and then put Trudeau back, like we did with the Taliban.
Yeah, Trudeau
All
goes
right,
away
so
for
you
about
have-
20 years
yeah,
and then he
so
comes
you have,
back. Fuck
so-
those Mounties. What are they gonna do?
fucking
They're
horse,
gonna listen is what they're gonna do.
fucking Brokeback Mountain cops.
Fucking America's hat. We're not afraid of America's hat.
But I don't know. I guess like a couple of things like that are kind of interesting to see, because we are seeing more and more people flood the border, the southern border. They're kind of just letting people in at this point. So much so that Joe Biden now has to build his racist wall to keep people out.
No.
No,
It's
not
not
the
a racist wall. It's a progressive vertical structure
Yes.
built by net zero carbon emission
Yes.
companies.
But the
It's a
funny
green
thing
wall.
is that the Biden administration sold $300 million worth of materials for $2 million, and now they have to purchase all of those materials again. So now the progressive wall, has now become more expensive than the one that Trump decided that he wanted to build. So, yeah.
Well, if you think that's fun, wait till you see what the oil reserves are looking like today. It ain't pretty.
Ah, yes. And Lindsey Graham would love to take out all of Iran's oil refineries so that oil prices skyrocket even more, I'm sure.
Well, that's good because we just go to Venezuela and support that authoritarian communist dictatorship too. We'll just do all the bad decisions.
It's progressive dictatorship, Aaron.
Oh. There's a distinction there. You're right. I've got nothing else. Hockey starts in what?
Yes.
Few days, week?
Tomorrow.
Is it tomorrow? Okay.
Yep. First game. Tomorrow.
All right,
There's
so
3 games
you have
on
that
tomorrow.
to look forward to. And then, will I be seeing you in a week or so?
No, unfortunately, I cannot make that. On that day that you will be in Philadelphia, I am actually in a beer brewing competition. So while you were here, you saw the 2 barrels of beer that I had fermenting. Well, that is all now good to go and will be subject to competition.
Good for you.
My friend runs the competition, so I kind of felt obligated to do it. And so I had to forego coming to the Eagles game with you. And also, Eagles tickets were ridiculously expensive. I wasn't paying.
Oh, no shit.
It was like
Mine's free. I didn't have to pay for it.
It was like $300 a ticket for nosebleed.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Whoa. Brutal.
Yeah.
Okay, well, if we record between now and then, that's fine. And if we don't, then hopefully I survive that football game? Question mark.
I don't know. Philly's been pretty bad lately, dude.
I know. You know what? Not that I want to go into it too much, but seeing all that like mass rioting or whatever, it's pretty interesting. America's cities are falling apart.
Yes, they are.
Okay. Well, this increasingly off the rails edition of the Almost Ordinary Moment, I think we could probably just call it there.
Sounds good, buddy.
Are you good? All
Yep.
right. Have a good one.
See ya.